I was 12 years old when I first started woodworking, and I started it at the Santa Barbara Junior High in an elective course, which I hadn't heard of before. Didn't really know what an elective course was, and I never really thought they'd let us use such complex power tools at such a young age, and yet they did, and I fell in love with it almost immediately. But this project was very special to me because if you had come to me when I was 12 years old in that class and you had gone, "Hey Xander, great project so far. One day, 4 odd years from now, you're gonna build Dos Pueblos High School's podium, your high school's podium." I wouldn't have believed you. I would have been completely baffled because at the time, I was making an iPhone speaker box. It was not my greatest build, let's just say that. And yet, about a month ago, I got an email from one of the administration at Dos Pueblos High asking me if I'd be able to build them a custom Dos Pueblos High School podium. And I replied back as fast as I could. I was very interested. I wasn't really in it for the money or any financial gain. I was looking at it as like, I get to leave a legacy at DP. And I think I sure enough did. This project was super fun to build. I got to do a lot of customization myself. I got to choose the wood, all kinds of stuff. It was a super fun project. I did a bunch of new stuff on it. I did big size finger joints. I've never done such big finger joints. And overall, I think it came out very nice. I brought it to the office and everybody loved it. So come along with me. This video is me building Dos Pueblos High School's podium.
I think I might have bought a little bit of poplar.
And that's great and all, except for the fact that I have no room, so I'm gonna have to clean this up first. While I clean this up, I'm also gonna start ahead of schedule and begin on the jig for the podium. So the edges, the joints are gonna be box joints, but they're these really big wide ones, and I want to do it as accurate as possible, so I'm just gonna make a CNC jig so that it's perfect. The joints come out super tight with my router. So I did some of the boards there, and they were all fine, except I wanted to show you something. I've done this on a few pine boards before, and the more material you're cutting off the edge, the more common, I would argue. But sometimes you get tension in these big boards, especially when the wood's a little softer. Poplar is a hardwood, but it's on the softer end. Anyways, I'm going to cut this, and it was binding like crazy, and my table saw didn't like it, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it. So I stopped, but I thought I'd show you. Here's where the table saw cut goes, and you can see at the top, it's come to a complete close, and there's a bunch of tension right here in that top of the wood, and it's pinching on the blade, which it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take all the big pieces and play it safe, run them on the bandsaw. It's a pain to go do it, but it's worth it for the risk of kickback alone. So. So the front panel is pretty dang huge, and it's also, 2-inch thick like the rest of everything. It's 8/4, and I'm pretty scared to cut it on my table saw, just because it's massive. So at the bare minimum, I'm gonna cut it down to as small as possible, maybe leave like 1/4 inch on all dimensions, so that it makes it easier for me. And then I'm gonna run it, and we'll just see how it goes. I took all these boards to my old high school and got them surfaced on the speed sander so they're nice and flat on both sides. I've got the jig ready for the finger joints, and now I'm going to put this sheet of Lexan, attach it to the base plate on the router so that it doesn't like fall off in this jig. And then we're going to get to finger jointing here pretty soon. So first thing, I put this on, and then I realized this isn't my plunge base, so I've got to take this off, do it again. So I'm going to do that. And then the second thing is, I was looking for this flush trim bit with the bearing on the bottom, and I usually keep all my bits in like that weird beefy looking drawer over there, and it wasn't in there. So I spent the entire last hour looking for this all over the shop, and it was on my CNC table underneath that blanket over there. So that was a massive waste of time. I almost went to the store and bought another one, so at least I saved that money. So I've got the jig right here, and it's going to go on like the side of each of these, sections. And I need a route from the top here. The only issue I have is I can't really put this on top of the table and reach right here. So I've got to figure out a way to make sure that this isn't falling over while I cut this. So I'm going to start by trying putting cinder blocks on either side. If that doesn't work, I got to find a different solution, but it needs to be stable and standing up like this. Otherwise, I can't really do the jig properly. Doing it on its side won't really be optimal. It'll be much more difficult to do that. So I'm gonna figure that out. Gotta figure out which way I'm gonna put them though. Are they gonna go upright like this or on their side? So I'm gonna try upright first, but they might not be heavy enough to do that. So we'll see. It's got a bit of a wobble going on, so I'm either gonna put wedges like here inside of it, or on the bottoms to kind of tilt the cinder blocks in a little bit, and prevent this from wiggling while I use the router over here. I'm gonna start with a really shallow pass first, but the bearing's not gonna be hitting this when I do that, so I need to be careful not to go into the edges. And it's kind of like sticky a little bit with the Lexan sheet I put on the router, so I'm gonna put a little bit of paste wax on the tops here so that it slides a little easier, and hopefully I don't go into either edge. That would be really bad. So I've done that first section there, and it looks really good. The plunge router base, which is that, I can't point, it's that one right there. It'll go maybe 2/3 of the way to where I need to be for the total depth. And then I'm gonna have to swap over to the standard base, which is right here, because it'll allow me to get more depth out of it. The plunge base simply can't go as deep. And that should be enough. It's right on the limit of how deep that base can go. So I might have to go out and buy a deeper bit, but we're gonna try it. We're gonna see how it goes. So what I'll do is I will cut out all the basic ones to like 2/3 of the total depth, and then come back at the very end with everything and go the full depth all the way through. The biggest thing that I have to be super, super careful about right now is this thing tipping. It's not like a huge surface. This is 8/4 poplar, so it's only like 1 3/4 inches wide. And when I'm cutting, it has a tendency to do this or this. And I've got to be careful because even just a tiny little bit of that means that my joint's not square against its face. So when I glue this all up, I'll have massive gaps in the glue up, and that's unacceptable. So I'm playing a little bit of a balancing game here, and it's a little tricky. So just this one spot, which is almost at full depth, it's not quite there yet. I need to swap to the other router. Took a really long time, like 45 minutes to an hour, because it's just so many small passes. So I think I'm going to attempt to use my circular saw to do the rest of them, but like rough it out. So like be like 1/2 inch off on all dimensions, and then do a bunch of cuts, bring all that material out, and then finish it off with the router. Theoretically, that should work fine. It's possible I could mess it up. I'd be really upset, but we're gonna give that a go because that's gonna save a ton of time. I think that was a pretty dang good idea. That roughed it out and saved me hours and hours and hours in the long run. So I'm glad I did that right after the first one. We're getting all kinds of benefits. I'm able to put the clamps on too without having to double stick tape or anything because they can just go in the existing wells. Pretty awesome. All right, now we can cue the ASMR. Go. I've got a very interesting situation with the corners that I didn't really think about before. I have a solution, I think, to it, but I didn't think about it. Now, this jig, the one that you've seen me been using, has two sides to it, so I can support with that piece of plastic you see underneath called Lexan on the router. That allows me to support it on either end. With this side, this isn't super crazy accurate because this has flex to it. So, I mean, I can clamp here, it'd probably be okay. I think the second thing is the better option, and that is I'm gonna put a board here that reaches the same height as the top of the finger joint, and that way I can still use my sled properly and it's supported. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do this because it would droop down and I would cause a big problem. So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do here and see if it can be accurate enough. So that's pretty straight across. Should work perfectly, and let's just see how it goes. It's looking pretty good. It's all lined up, so now I've got to do that 4 more times on all the different sides, and then the final pass to make it full depth, and then we're ready for glue up. The plunge base setup works super well to do the first half of the thickness on the fingers, but it's not quite deep enough. I can't get it to go all the way down, and I need it to go to like 1 3/4 inches to fit in properly. So I got the standard base out, which allows me to go quite a bit deeper. I'm still like a 1/16 off, like super small. So what I think I'm gonna do is just lower the bit in the collet here, just a tiny little bit, and then we should get the full depth, and it should be all good to go. Doesn't really get much better than this. I did a pretty dang good job getting these finger joints flawless. I mean, there's a tiny gap for some wood glue, but overall, Podium's looking pretty dang cool. So I'm thinking we do the angle here and we keep like a small top section on the front of it, so it kind of goes like straight and then angles down, and I'm thinking that gap from here to here is going to be roughly 6 inches. So I'm going to lay that out and then cut that on both sides, and then we're ready to glue up. Put these finger joints in and we'll go from there. So it's pretty hard to see in the video, but the line that we just drew goes from here to here, so it's kind of like that or so. And that's, I'm kind of glad I put it here because that's not really what I was going for. It's a little bit deep, so I'm going to test around and see what I like, you know, a little bit less of an angle. But that just seems pretty steep from here. It might still be the one I go with, but so far it doesn't really look proper, so I'm going to toy around with it. So I've ended up with 2 different lines, one's shallower, one's deeper. I'm going to cut the shallower one and then put it up against the Podium and see if I like that. If I like that, then we're good to go. If not, I didn't remove all the material and I can go deeper and it's not a problem. So we're gonna do that. I'm super glad I took a double take on this because this angle is plenty deep enough. The other one would have been okay too, but like standing behind this, you might not be able to see it in the video, but it just feels so much better. And because I want to match this with the angle of where the reader can put, you know, their readings on, their notes on, this is just going to be so much better than a farther angle, because when you come to stand on it, right, you're here. A really steep angle means it's going to be hard to read the notes, whereas a slightly less steep is even better. Flat is hard too, but just a tiny angle is much better than a super deep one, and that just looks better on a side profile in my opinion. So I think we got a winner. I'm going to mimic it on the other side. So now I'm fully ready to glue up. It's gonna be kind of a big one. I wanna make sure both sides are like perfectly square because the inner drawer isn't gonna fit if it's not. So I'm gonna use the CNC to make some dead square, like guide clamping systems so that I can keep everything tight and organized. Well, I've never quite done it that way before. That is incredibly painful as a woodworker. This took way too long. My CNC usually doesn't take that long. This took like 2 hours to do, so hopefully it was worth it, and it helps a lot because that took a really long time. I'm gonna go ahead and do a glue up time lapse here. It's a pretty big one, and primarily because I want to listen to my music and it's copyrighted. So if I did it in a normal video, you'd hear the music. Can't do that. So cue the time lapse. Here we go. That was one of the harder glue ups I've done in a long, long time. I am sweating like crazy. It's not quite exactly perfect, but it's not bad. I will take it, and I got it all in before the glue set, so I call it a success for sure. So now it's time to do the next two steps, and most of it's just gluing up panels. The front of the podium is going to have big DP on it, their Dos Pueblos logo. So that's going to be out of walnut, so I have to glue up a walnut panel for that, maybe 3/4 thickness. And then I've got, a 5/6 board here that I'm going to use to make the drawer section on the inside. So it's going to have a bottom panel, top panel, but it's also going to be angled so that when the person in the podium is reading, it's on like a slight angle. And that's going to have a hinged door, and I want to use these hidden hinges. So most of today is just panel glue ups. I've got to do at least 3 or 4 panel glue ups. I don't have enough poplar to finish the podium because I need a base section, but I'll run and grab some more 8/4 for that. But that's the plan for now. The joiner's not quite in its normal spot because I put the podium in the middle of the room, but it's a small one, it has wheels, and it has an extension cord, so it's still going to work over there. This thing's looking pretty awesome. I just took it off the CNC, so I'm gonna cut it on the bandsaw, trim it out, and then we can lay it on here and see how it's gonna look in the end, but it's looking pretty badass, DP. So now I can go ahead and attach these side beams. I'm gonna go here and here. And this is kind of like the base of what we're looking at. So now I'm gonna create a lid that's tilted. And that lid's gonna have these special sauce hinges I bought. They're really fancy. And it's gonna lift up on top, but this is gonna be like the presenter's like drawer of sorts, kind of like a little storage space. And then on top, this tilt is where they're gonna put their papers that they're reading off or they're presenting notes. So I gotta screw these in and then we can get to making the lid. So now I'm gonna install these like super cool like sauce hinges or whatever they're called. They're like completely invisible. I really like them. They're $20 each, but there's a reason for it. They're really fancy and they're gonna be completely hidden. And before I do the front panel on this drawer section, I want to inlay them into the section that is going to be, connected to the podium. Because if I mess up, all I have to replace is this. Instead of if I glue it all together and do it and mess up, gotta replace the whole panel and do this angled glue up again, and I don't want to do that. So they gave me a template, which is really awesome, so I'll use that. And the only thing I'm worried about is that the minimum thickness is 3/4, and that's what I got, and it's gonna be pretty tight, so I'm gonna give it a shot. I think I'll be able to make it happen, but like I said, doing it on this piece before, just in case I mess it up. So. This came out super good looking. Take a look at that. Oh yeah. Now I'm gonna mimic it over on that side. And then these ends are actually gonna go straight into the back of this panel. So not anything to do with the drawer section, just straight into the podium itself. So I'm gonna do some more mortising straight into there. But I'm a big fan of these hinges. These are really cool. They're very expensive, but I think I'll be buying more in the future, that's for sure. So I've got the top lid section done. I've actually got the hinges half in as well. These are really neat hinges. So the next step is I want to glue in this little front piece that I made earlier. Put a couple screws in the sides with plug holes. Then I have to make some plug holes here so that I can screw in to the actual podium itself. But before screwing into the podium, I need to do a lot of sanding. I've got some glue in the seams. It's just dirty in general, and I don't want to have to get into any tight corners later. So I'll sand that, and then once that's sanded, this can go in. I'm gonna pre-fit it. I'm not gonna glue it in yet. I do want to glue it for extra stability in the long run, like put glue here. But if I glue and mess up the hinges, I'm screwed. So I'm gonna screw it in first, do the hinges. If everything goes to plan, I can take it out and then glue it in. Otherwise, I can shift it up and down still and maintain the hinge fit, so. So before I put the drawer in, I have all these, sockets or little Forstner bit cutouts so that I can inset these screws. And I don't really want that to be visible. And while, yes, if you're standing at the front of the podium, technically you won't see it, but I'm a perfectionist, so I'm gonna go ahead and make some plugs to go into all these holes, because when it's flipped over, there's gonna be, the side of the podium against here, which is gonna make it very hard to flush those up. So it'll be easier to do it now. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then I think while those are drying and I'm waiting for them, I'll take the DP sign, which is down there, and start getting it lined up on the front for gluing that on. So. So I've got the base section of that drawer all installed. I'll put some plugs in here to hide all the screws in a second. The next step is taking the top part of the lid here that has the really cool sauce hinges on them. And that goes up in the top here. It's really hard to do with one hand. And I've got to mortise that into there and that into there. Once those are in, I have to figure out a way to do a kind of a tricky glue up with this piece because it's at an angle. So it's gonna go up like that, and I've gotta figure out how I'm gonna do enough clamping force onto this piece. But once that's done, the build out of the drawer is completely done, and it's just sanding from there. And then I've got a base to do as well. So we're gonna do a big 8/4 base panel. I gotta run out and get some more poplar. And that's gonna have these fancy casters I found that the red thing doesn't stop the caster from rolling. It stops the thing from rotating. So it becomes a one directional caster, which is really cool. And then it obviously has an on-off lever there to stop the wheel. But these are big heavy duty casters to go on the bottom. And then a bunch of sanding, still gotta put the DP sign on the front. And then once that's done, it's just a bit of ODs and we're all finished. So I've got the front lid on, haven't glued it yet. There's two things I want to do before I get this all glued together. Number one, the gap on the sides, while it's okay, I don't really like it like that. I think I'm going to put a chamfer on the edge of both sides so that it just looks more uniform, gets rid of any unevenness in that gap. And then number two, when I glue this up, it's going to be really tricky because this is at an angle going onto here. So I think what I'm going to do is put a ton of tape over these two and then a shim here and here underneath so that it's just slightly levitating, and this has just got slightly lifted up, which will put all the gravity from this being lifted onto this joint with all the tape on it, and that should result in a really clean seal here. Because you see how it's kind of gappy. It's going to be impossible to put a clamp going that way. So that's my my plan. So I'm going to pull this off and pull this off. I'm going to do the chamfers, and then we're going to get to taping that and doing the best we can with that glue up. That chamfering looks way better. So now it's time to do a bunch of tape, not only on the top but on the inside too, so I don't spill glue all over the place. And then see what we can do. See if we can make it happen. Looking pretty dang good. Smooth up and down. No friction against the sides. I'm gonna put a big round over on the front here so that you can get your fingers under it. Otherwise, I built it with an angle so like there's no way to grab this. So make it easy, and then clean up sand, and the drawer is basically done. Gotta put the plugs in. But yeah, now I'm on the base, so base is next. So I went to the hardware store today and I bought a bit more poplar. This is kind of dark, but what can you do? It was also way more expensive than my usual lumber supplier, but they're like 50 minutes away. I didn't want to drive that far. Anyways, I got that poplar in 8/4 because that's what the casters are going to go on, and then it's going to go like down at the bottom there, just enough so that it has maybe a 1/2 inch clearance with the casters for the floor. So I've got to mill this up right now, join it and everything, glue that up, and while that's gluing up, I'm going to go ahead and take the DP sign, line it up, and glue that on the front. And then, you know, once this is done gluing, I'll be able to put that base plate on, put the casters on, and then the only thing left is just a ton of sanding, some ODs, and we're all done. So the next step is putting the DP logo on the front of the podium, and I'm going to align it, and then I'm going to clamp it in quite an interesting way. So watch the next clip because this is going to be super cool. But I need to align this properly, and the cool part is it's exactly 20 inches by 20 inches. That's what I programmed into the CNC, which makes it a little easier on myself. But I'm going to go about 4 inches from the top, and then you know, whatever on the sides is equal. And then use tape and mark up this so it's exactly 20 by 20. And then watch how I clamp this. I'm going to do it in kind of a unique way because it doesn't seem like you'd be able to clamp here. And then once it's clamped down, let that set, and then we'll have a DP logo on the very front. It'll be pretty cool. So I took that board out of clamps and it's ready to be cross-cutted. Now I was going to originally parallel it on the table saw, but I measured it and it's exactly the same. So this way we're not really worried, it's not a big deal. And so I'm going to square off and cut down the sides to be the proper length to fit inside the podium. And then once it's fitting in there, I'm gonna sand the bottom because it'll be really hard to sand later. Throw all those casters over there onto it. And then go ahead and install it. Put some plugs on the side and put some big 4-inch construction screws through it. Make it nice and durable. And then we're on to sanding after that. And then it's finished and we're done. That took way too much thinking and analysis than I thought it would take, but I finally got the casters in an orientation that definitely works, and especially like on a smoother piece of MDF like this, it works so much better. So bad news, that was incorrect. What originally happened was I put all the casters on and I went to push it and it went flying forward because of how much front weight was on it. Like there's no back panel to this podium, right? So the front of the podium weighed way more than anything on the back. And no matter how much I counterweighted it or realigned the casters, it just kept going forward. And for some reason in the shop on the MDF, maybe it was twisted or something, it was fine. It was pushing, relatively okay. When I took it to DP, it didn't do so. So I had to take those casters off. They were too big, they didn't work. I tried a few other designs, but only broke more casters in the process. So for now, it doesn't have any casters, but I'm gonna stop by sometime in the near future and try to fix that, come up with a solution. So maybe it can tilt back, but the weight of the podium kind of tricked me out on this one, and I thought I had a solution, but it doesn't always work out. So for now, no casters. So I realized I just forgot one last thing before we go ahead and start sanding on the podium, and that is the screws, the big long 4-inch screws we put in for the base, for the casters. They need plugs going in them, otherwise there's just going to be screws on the side, and that's hideous. So I don't have a dowel, I don't have a 3/4 plug drill bit, so I'm going to make it on my lathe and then just chop it into sections and throw those in, and then we can start sanding and putting finish on, and then we're done. It was a little bit tricky cutting them here. I used this so that I wouldn't, get my fingers anywhere close. And they weren't quite perfect, but I managed to slam them in. So I've got all 3 plugs on either side. So now I just got to clean up everything. So I'm going to go through 120 first. It doesn't need an 80, so I'm just going to go through 120, 180, 220 ODs. Got to clean all this mess up, all this glue everywhere, all this glue everywhere, all that kind of stuff. But it's about to look really, really good. Almost done. So I was putting the ODs on and finishing the whole podium, and it looks great, except on my second step, I was doing the top of the lid. And I was like, wait a second, because I put some ODs here, and then I was like, something's wrong. And I realized I completely forgot the little lip that I'm gonna put right here, so that, papers, books, whatever, doesn't fall off. It's pretty standard on like every podium. And I put like a few dabs of ODs and then realized I'd messed up. So I quickly taped over this section. You can kind of see that line right there. So now, with that being dry and not OD'd, thankfully, because if it is OD'd, the glue wouldn't stick very well, I can go ahead and take, cut a strip off like this piece of poplar, and I'll be able to put that strip on, overnight, and then just a quick OD's coat in the morning, and that'll be all finished. But I'm glad I caught it right before I went and pushed the ODs all across here. because that would have been pretty bad. But I'm gonna go ahead and make that and put that on. I had a great time building this project for DP. It was super fun. I'm honored that you guys reached out to me, so thank you, DP. I hope you enjoy your new Podium. I did my absolute best, and I think it came out pretty dang awesome.